Why, hello there. Thanks so much for joining us for the Long Comics Book Club, a bi-weekly podcast about long comics, also known as manga and graphic novels. My name is Shane, and I'm the older brother. I'm joined by Spence, the younger brother. How's it going, Spence?
Going pretty good. It's going pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. I appreciate you asking. For those who have listened to some of our last episodes, you'll notice I'm changing that from Spencer saying hello because after listening to it back, I realized that that was a little awkward. So this is going to be the new template moving forward. And if you are new to the show otherwise, thanks for joining us. So for the first half of the show, we'll be talking about the long comic we read over the past 2 weeks. Today, that is The Punisher. Welcome back, Frank. Story by Garth Ennis, inks by Jimmy Palmiotti, pencils by Steve Dillon. We'll give our reactions, takeaways, discussion points, book club things. And for the second part of the show, we'll be chatting about some of the other visual media we've consumed recently. To make sure you avoid spoilers, we'll include time codes in the episode description. And of course, we'll end the show with Spence introducing the long comic for the next podcast, which will come out on March 29th. To be notified of when the podcast is out, you can follow our Blue Sky or Instagram at Long Comics Book Club. On that page, you can also find a link to our Discord to join in the conversation, and we also have all of these links on our link tree. One of those links is to VesperiaComics.com, because Spence, of course, is the owner and proprietor of Vesperia Comics, not just an online store, but physically located at 1935 West Broadway in Vancouver, British Columbia. Spence, any updates from the shop?
No, not. Things are pretty much as they are. I guess the biggest one would be our distributor for models and figures. We're moving for a while. So we weren't able to get new stuff from them for like over a month, and that's since passed. So now we've got new Gundams, new figures and stuff in stock now.
That's excellent and exciting news. And how are we feeling about tariffs? Do tariffs impact you? Just lightly touching on.
Yeah, lightly touching on current events. I think we're good because most of all our figures and stuff come from Japan. So that's not going to be a problem. It's just really a question of books. And I can definitely tell you, I have flipped through the fronts of so many books trying to figure out how much stuff is printed in Canada versus printed in the United States. So it's about 60% of stuff is printed in Canada. So hopefully that just means they can like change it around to have more stuff get printed into Canada and all things work out with that stuff.
Fingers crossed for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully we won't have to check back in on this in the future. But yeah,
Let's
touching current events, nice to check in on that end. And all the more reason to support small local businesses. Of course, Vesperia Comics does carry whatever kind of graphic novels, manga you're interested, including the one that we're going to be talking about today, The Punisher. Welcome back, Frank. We're going to start off with a very important trigger warning. We haven't done a trigger warning in a few episodes, actually since episode 2, but this one's very important. This is trigger warning for excessive violence, excessive gore, excessive gore, excessive violence, suicide, as well as racial stereotyping, but not as a commentary. This is very much not a book for everyone, and if it is for you're not sure if it's for you, you can always check out the first few pages. It'll give you a very clear indicator about how you're going to feel about the rest of it. So again, these are numerous trigger warnings. The time codes are in the description because we'd love to join you afterwards if maybe this is not your cup of tea, or maybe you're a little understandably adverse to violence or discussion around gore. Because without further ado, let's dive right into it. So Spence, why did you recommend this absolute slaughter fest?
So I should point out, I think I mentioned this last time, that Garth Ennis is my favorite comic book art writer. And not only that, but this is the same penciler duo that same duo he did for penciling with that he did for a comic book called Preacher, which is my favorite comic book series of all time. So, and this is like a much more simpler, more straightforward one-volume take on that, while also being like, this was very much the like reinventing of the Punisher. It came out like right a couple years before that like Thomas Jane Punisher movie, and then this kind of like set the tone for what the Punisher would be like, basically up till now.
Okay, that's interesting to learn about. There's a couple things to jump into there. So first, Haven't seen the Punisher movie, so can't unfortunately speak to that. But
Yeah.
prior to this, what was the Punisher before 2001?
So like the Punisher was a lot more so when the Punisher was created, he was a Spider-Man villain. In the 90s and stuff, they did make like a lot more like they did the whole like they totally leaned in. 90s are kind of famous for being like overly violent, lots of gun stuff. So the Punisher had a lot coming for that. But for the most part, he didn't quite have this like I know based on the comic we're about to say this might sound strange, but it got a lot more like intelligent about
Hmm.
Welcome Back Frank. Because Welcome Back Frank like has a certain level of like commentary to it that was really missing from like 90s Punisher comics.
Okay. Considering that there's very little commentary, I assume there must have been zero.
Yeah, there was zero, but like also like
Okay.
yeah, because like this comic does answer like questions about like well, how does the Punisher fit into the world and all that, where
Mhm.
90s comics very much didn't do. I'm sure some of like there was a certain level of that, but it was much more like here is Punisher, here is bad guy, Punisher will kill all bad guy, move on to next story.
That's so funny because it still sounds like you're describing what we just read. Um, to be upfront, I thought it was okay. This was not my favorite thing in the world. I think there's certainly some good parts to it, but that there was also some parts I either found problematic or just kind of put me to sleep. It was a really weird read.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of different elements going on in there. So the plot summary, do you want to try and provide? I mean, I think what's interesting is you essentially just gave the plot summary I
Yeah.
would give.
Well, there is a certain yes, the Punisher has been, which I guess this is some background that is like completely irrelevant. That at before this plot, the Punisher, which I think they actually do allude to, the Punisher was like dead, and they had him fight angels and stuff. So this is him
Okay.
coming back to life and just coming. But like the relevant part to that for this story is that the Punisher's been gone for a couple years. So now
Hmm.
he's back in New York, and he's decided he's at war with the underworld.
Manucci,
Yeah,
the
the Ganucci
Nucci's.
family. The Ganucci family are the main one. And then while this is happening, there's a subplot about, well, two subplots. One of people trying to copy him, and another one about the task force that has been assigned to try to take down the Punisher.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll talk about all those different perspectives. So something important though, right at the forefront, you pronounce it Ganucci. I assumed it was a silent G.
Oh, it's probably, yeah. Yes, probably. This
Okay.
is a
I'll
true
say
case.
Nucci, you say Ganucci. We'll cover our bit. I just almost want
Yeah.
to just call them Nokis just because it's close enough to the actual
Yeah.
word that I know. But
Yeah.
the plot is really straightforward. There is certainly the subplots going on. So it is, yeah, very simple that Frank Castle is back. He wants to kill the Nucci family for some reason. They're bad. They're crime
Well,
family.
yeah.
Must kill crime family. He gets hurt along the way, but he does end up killing crime family. And end of book. But there's obviously some more to that. But that's my super watered down version of
Yeah.
events. Starting right at the top, I do like the title. I always like to think about the title, and I think that it's a great title, not just because it is Welcome Back, Frank, but that he's literally coming back, so it makes sense it's Welcome Back. But I think that it's important to note that he is Frank, Welcome Back, Frank, because he is a character. He's not just the Punisher in this,
Yeah.
but like you sort of alluded to, there is some actual. I was shocked that there was character development on the Punisher.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it. I thought that the arc that he has, where he just doesn't care for his neighbors, and then at the end he cares for them, he protects them, and he gives them money, I thought was very Robin Hood-esque, and I was impressed by that character development.
Yeah.
I
Well,
oh,
like, yeah, like I think the Punisher is one of the best parts of this whole uh like story, especially because like when you really look at it, it's like the Punisher's almost like from a different comic book. Like the world around has this like level of like satirical weirdness to it that the Punisher just does not have in any way, shape, or form. Like other people are like like cracking jokes and like crazy stuff is happening to them, but the Punisher is like head down, like like my only purpose is to murder for like at first,
Hmm.
and then he like grows a little bit through the rest of it. But yeah, I found that's one of the
Yeah.
coolest parts.
Okay. That's certainly something that I was catching on. And I'm glad that you brought that up as well, because I think that I did not love that part of it.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe it was I thought that the parts where it was more serious, I really enjoyed. I enjoyed my favorite scene in here is the one with Daredevil. I think that
Mm,
that's really great. And I think in retrospect, I could almost see that having been the uh, conclusion that that's sort of at the very height of conflict is when he has Daredevil tied up and says, the
yeah.
shoot me or otherwise I'm going to kill people. And that's a really tense moment, that's really the best. I guess when you were talking earlier about there being some sort of depth to this,
Yeah.
that's a moment that does actually have a lot of depth to it. And that's why I really liked it. And so I really valued those realistic parts that come along with the Punisher. And I don't really care for her getting attacked by polar bears and him bouncing off her and a guy
Yeah.
getting
Or
eaten by
yeah,
piranhas.
the
That's
the Russians' entire thing.
the Russians. Yeah, the like cartoony nature of this is
Yeah,
not.
that's a perfect way to describe it. Yes, it was like a cartoon, and then the Punisher's like completely different. That's yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that the art style also plays into that. It's very cartoony.
Yes.
I was realizing that early on that the art is surprising for the content. It doesn't really match up, but why I agree that the Punisher I mean, it's a story about the Punisher, but why he's so great in this is that it's really clear that Garth Ennis has an excellent ability to create his voice.
Yes.
And the Punisher you could hear so clearly, and his inner monologues are the best part of reading this, and his sort of train of thought that's so clinical. It really is, if it was honestly, if it was just about the Punisher and it was a little bit more serious for the duration of it, I think that I would be into the whole thing. I think it's just that there's some notable aspects to this that I just really didn't love.
So I find that very interesting because what you're describing is Garth Ennis's Punisher Max series he did after this.
Hmm.
So like Welcome Back Frank is the more so Punisher Max gets like even more violent and even more gory, but it's also like but yeah, like that. It's less of a cartoon.
Hmm.
So like we're not if we would ever do it, we'd be doing it like we're not doing it ever probably, but it would be the more probably the one that would fit more with your what you would yeah, be more your style then.
Okay. To be clear, I am not being rah rah violence gore. That is
Yeah.
not
No,
the
no,
takeaway I meant from
I know,
this.
but 100% I know you're not. But
But the
you're like you're not down for like the Russians that. You're like you want the more of the Punisher being like yeah. What
yeah,
like
being serious that we're taking murder seriously.
yeah,
That
like
we're
like the opening for the Punisher Max is like about what Frank went through in Vietnam. So it's
mm,
like
mhm.
way more yeah.
Intense and okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does sound like that would be more up my alley. Just because I really appreciate that gritty, that realistic, matching the tone to the character, which I
Yeah.
think like I think great. Kudos to them for exploring something different with this one. Uh, and I can understand that it's fun and appealing to some people. I read a really weird review online that called this book hilarious, which made my skin crawl a little bit. But the moments of humor in this are perhaps not for me with Ma Nucci with no arms and legs bouncing around trying to bite him. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know how I feel about this. This starts to get that feeling of the boys that we talked about last time.
Yes. Well,
Uh,
exactly. And then this is side the same writer as the boys.
mhm.
And also, I think we mentioned with the Daredevil thing, it's like that is an absolute great point, but I also think it ties into Garth Ennis's general dislike of superheroes and the
Mhm.
whole like superhero mythos.
Mhm.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
this very much is in that same case.
And why there's like no superheroes in this. And
Yeah.
they're
Yeah,
very much all anti-heroes,
yeah.
and the vigilante squad in particular to the nth degree. Uh,
Yes.
and so I think the plot is good. I think it's straightforward. I, Again, there's parts of it that I didn't find that exciting. I think that it really peaks when you have him getting shot, and then it just improves from there during his
Mm.
recovery from Spacker Dav and
Yeah.
Spacker Dave and Joan, and building
Yes.
relationships. And um, it's also a way more text dense book than I expected. I expected this to be very action heavy, but there is a lot of reading in this.
Yes. Well, because that's another Garth Ennis staple is just like people randomly having like the most weird conversations that go on for like an entire page
Mhm.
of like effectively just one person monologuing about something that happened in the past. And it's always like weird, but I don't know. I kind of love it.
Okay, yes. I mean, it's great if you enjoy it. So, um, yeah, I'd say the plot had some good parts, had some parts I found weren't as great, but I appreciate bringing that identifying that the Punisher is sort of thrown into this cartoony world, and how does he then engage with that cartoony world?
Yeah.
One part of the plot that I found very interesting in a couple of different ways is the vigilante plot.
Yes.
What's sort of your thoughts, reactions, and in particular, how do we feel about the team up at the end?
Well, I think it's like does do that little bit of I think it's a way to like feature the Punisher as this, but also not like showing it if it's to not show it in favor. It lets it show this story while not showing it in favor or too much of vigilantism.
Mhm.
Yeah, or vigilantism.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, it's not putting him on a pedestal. It's not
yeah,
saying vigilantism is unquestionably the right thing to do.
yes, exactly. It's like because I think that's really the thing. Because like you could get that. Because then that's kind of honestly kind of a problem with modern pay Punisher fans is they treat it like the Punisher is in the right. Where like a big plot, less of a point in this one, but definitely more of a thing in other Punisher stuff, is that the Punisher is actually very bad at his job.
Hmm.
Like he doesn't accomplish anything by killing all of these people. There's always more bad guys to kill, and more important than any of that, the Punisher is not even remotely happy about doing it.
Hmm.
He's just going forward from like a sense of this is all he knows. And like this
Yeah.
isn't something to aspire to be. And I think the vigilante squad really is showing that to like an extreme degree.
Hmm. Yeah, we had mentioned this last time about the people that are super big Punisher fans and see him as being in the right, which is very deeply problematic, obviously.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think that you sort of answered what I was going to ask, which is that more an element of the character or the way in which he's portrayed? And so I think it is if you're not portraying him properly, he's for sure problematic and will draw in that kind of crowd.
Yeah.
Um, and so it sounds like though that you think that Garth Ennis in this, do you think in this one he does a good enough job making it clear that the Punisher's vigilantism is problematic, or because he has like it seems like everybody loves the Punisher,
Yeah.
and
And
so
like,
it's
no, it's they probably could have done a better job at it, but I still
mhm,
think it. Like, I think the at the very least, like the attempt is there. It's clearly
mhm.
how Garth Ennis feels about it, if even if it's not shown that well.
So then to tie back to a question I had, the Vigilante Squad. Do you believe the team up at the end? I think I'm going to answer this myself. I think that this now plays into what you were talking about with it being cartoony. The fact that you have what they identify as a Nazi, like pairing up with this guy who's all about representing the lower class,
Oh yeah,
it makes no sense. It's
no, it makes
completely
absolutely no
illogical.
sense. But I think that's kind of the point. It's supposed to be completely illogical. And with
Okay,
with the
that's
crazy priest as well, like none of them would ever get, and like none of them would even remotely get along, which is kind of the point. They would probably try to kill each other instead, but
mhm.
their love of the Punisher, I guess.
Yeah. So, do you think, with all this zaniness, do you think there's a purpose behind the zaniness, or is it just for the sake of, like, why do a Punisher story this way?
Well, that's a good question. To me, it just feels right. Like it feels like the an interesting way to like look at the Punisher. Like make it zany, make it because definitely at a certain level you can't it can just get so bogged down in like the grit if they don't try to lighten it up a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mhm. That's true. I also was just remembering that I don't know if you read the foreword, but I should have thought of that immediately as soon as I asked that question. I will quote at the very start of this book that is written by Garth Ennis. In the foreword, one of the paragraphs says, "That's what I'm going for with his series, folks. Entertainment, plain and simple. Not a complex analysis of the causes of crime, nor a portrait of one man's tragic descent into murderous psychosis. Not an in-depth examination of the vigilante down the ages. Not the recipe for Coca-Cola either, come to that. Just a laugh, a thrill, and plenty of sustained automatic weapons. Fire for your buck." So I read that before even starting this book, and I my first thought was, oh, okay. So I
Okay.
guess we'll just take
Because
off having any sort of depth to conversation off the
like
table.
that feels like Garth Ennis is selling himself a little short there. Like I feel there's a little more to it. Like there is a little bit of that in here.
Mhm. Yeah, that's that's true. Yeah, I hope I think so as well. So moving on, so we've talked about the art, we've talked about the plot, the title, the characters. So you had talked about this at the start. There's two main characters, which is sort of your hero. You have the Punisher and your villain. You have Mon Nucci, and then you have the two side stories with um, Soap and Molly, who are on the task force, and the vigilante squad. Um, First, I would have liked this a lot more if Soap and Molly just weren't in it. I couldn't care less.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, I kind of agree.
They
I don't.
provide nothing to this
Yeah,
story.
basically not. Yeah, like they're just kind of there. I think I think Soap works a little better before Molly shows up. Like, I think his early bit of like this is the most down and out cop like on the planet, and yeah, no one would ever want to actually try to catch the Punisher. So like, I think that
Mhm.
kind of works. But then once it becomes him and Molly and the whole thing with the movies going back and forth, it just kind of feels a bit like padding.
100% it does feel like padding. And even before Molly comes around, that they're doing the stereotypical behavioral psychologist, look how weenie he is, and that he hangs himself.
Yeah.
And that ultimately it really is padding. If they were not in the book, nothing changes. It I don't
Yeah.
think they impact the plot at any point. They in fact are very intentional about saying we're not going to get involved with the plot. And they make up a significant portion of it.
Yeah, like
Uh
even the part at the end when they show up at the end really only affects themselves. Doesn't really
yeah,
change.
it doesn't change anything with the Punisher. It's a weird choice to include them and it feels like wasted space. And I think that that's part of why I wish that the Daredevil had been more prominent and had that was the proper conclusion, because then that gives both Daredevil an arc as well as the Punisher an arc, and there's intersection there. Um, but what do I know? I'm no I'm no comic book writer expert. I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's a reason for doing it this way, but anytime I flipped a page and saw that I was going to have to listen to these two talk in long text bubbles, I just sighed. And then how do you feel about Manucci and the Russian as our villains?
So I Monucci feels a little, which is really strange to say because the Punisher seems would be far and away the more one-dimensional one on his face, but I think he's the more interesting than Monucci. Monucci like really doesn't have much to her. She has some great lines and stuff. Like I do love how the first line, like after her attack, is like someone asks her how she's doing, and then it just like immediately flips to Sarah with her limbs, and she says like, "How do you think I'm doing right now?"
Yeah.
Like I thought that was like Bonucci had some great lines. I thought the Punisher, the Russian was the more interesting one, which is also doubly interesting because you mentioned you'd never seen the Thomas Jane movie, but the Russian is like one of the villains in that, despite the fact that this is the entirety of his comic book appearances.
Oh, that's surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it kind of has to be seeing as he dies, but
Yes. Welcome to the biggest problem with Punisher is he like by nature cannot have actual villains that last very long.
right. Because he just has to kill all of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way he kills the Russian is by suffocating him under a morbidly obese person.
Yeah.
Again, playing into the cartoony violence
Yeah,
of
but
this
I do kind of
blood.
think I really like that about the actual fight with him. How it's like the actual Russian is like immune to violence for the most part because it's because he's a cartoon character. So like the
Hmm.
entire fight is Frank just trying to find something capable of actually hurting him, and then he realizes,
Hmm.
oh, heat is like the one thing on of all the random stuff he hits him with. It's the only thing that like even slows him down.
Yeah, exactly. Just like a supervillain. It's his kryptonite.
Yeah,
And I think that that's a great point that Mahanuchi has great lines. I really enjoy when she is telling each person to kill the last person in her
yeah,
room, and they just start stacking up the numbers, but that there's literally nothing to her. She's just
yeah,
evil, and that she's just evil because she is. And that's lame.
yeah.
Like, I think a great villain, I can't remember where I heard that, but a really great villain can absolutely make or break a story.
Oh, absolutely.
And Manushi is not it. The Russian is, I agree. I think that there could be something with the Russian. He's not super dimensional, but
No,
he at least has clear motivation that
yeah,
he just loves violence, that he was in Afghanistan
yeah,
taking a vacation. And so I appreciated the Russian more than I appreciated Manucci. I could do without her. Um, but I enjoyed the vigilante story. I thought that those were very interesting. And even if the team up part was super contrived,
yeah,
I thought that that was still valuable. Just could have, yeah. I think that the reflections on the puff piece part of the task force is really interesting to sort of think about and why include that at all? What kind of value does it bring?
yeah.
It's
I
really
think
interesting.
the idea is supposed to be like, yeah, police. Like, here's proof police actually exist in this universe. Because if those two
Mhm.
weren't there, sure wouldn't appear that way. But
Yeah. And so, in terms of people existing in the universe, I have to mention that it is really uncomfortable that there is just no people of color in this. And that the only people of color that appear, I think that there's six of them that are drug dealer associated that all speak with like very specific slang accents and that all get murdered. And the only person of color that has a talking line that doesn't die is the weather person. That's the extent of non-white characters in this book. And I understand that it's you never want to be pushing in diversity just for the sake of pushing it in, but there is obviously importance in having diverse casting and that was really weird to see. I think it's just makes it so much more stark. It's the first time you actually see a speaking person of color. I believe is the first person that the Holy murders, and he's
yeah,
talking and just it's really hard to read. But I think it's just one of those things that's super important to acknowledge and speak to. And yeah, weird parts of this book. Um, that's for sure. But I think that that's captures a lot of my thoughts on the Punisher and some really interesting things to talk about around that. Was there anything else in the book that you wanted to hit on that you think that we've skipped over?
um, not really. One thing I think they did really with the vigilante squad at the end is about how like yeah, Mr. Payback, which is like the big thing about him was he just didn't care about the Punisher has like this really weird code about innocence and stuff, which
Hmm.
I do think is like a very important part of the character. And like, why do I always, of all the comics I keep on bringing up, Civil War is coming back up for this for some reason? Because that's a big point about the Civil War is that like at one point in that Punisher just like Punisher's on one of the sides in Civil War, and he just guns down a bunch of supervillains who are trying to help out the side he's on. And then Captain America like freaks out at him. And he's like, "How could you do that?" The whole thing about Punisher's like, "That's just what I do. Like, I will kill bad people. I will never hurt like good people or anything like that." I don't know.
I didn't realize Punisher was in Civil War.
Yeah, Punisher's a big part about Civil War, actually.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
now I'm even more interested in
Okay, yeah.
Civil War.
At this point, there is no way we aren't doing Civil War at some point. So.
At some point, we're gonna have to. But I mean, you've done a great job with this one where I had no knowledge of Punisher. And so this very easily stands on its own. Can
Yeah.
Civil War stand on its own without pre-reading? I can't imagine so.
Not really.
No,
But
okay.
but that being said, there is a comic that actually like so there's Civil War was like a year-long thing, but there is one comic just called Civil War, and like you'll need to know who the characters are, and there's going to be a lot of characters you're not going to know no matter what we do. But like as long as you know who Iron Man and Captain America are, you can like kind of piece together what's going on in just the main Civil War comic.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll think about it. Maybe
Yeah.
read it again. Decide whether or not going in fully blind makes any sense for that one.
Yeah.
Um, the last part I'll just want to touch on. You actually mentioned this right at the start, which is Preacher. So that's I have only heard of Preacher. I didn't know it was your favorite comic.
Yeah.
And so I did know Preacher was similar idea where it's a guy with no superpowers who murders people.
That's not
No, no, no,
because
actually.
he has superpowers and he actually has a big part when he
Oh,
oh yeah.
okay.
So the premise of Preacher is a god like a preacher who has like completely lost all faith in God. Um Out of nowhere gets like hit and possessed by a holy being that gives him the word of God. So anything he says to someone, if he wants to, they have to do. And then it becomes him and his ex-girlfriend and a vampire he meets up with along the way go on a like road trip to literally find God. So God has left heaven and has gone to earth, and they are literally trying to find him.
Wow. Okay. So that's probably as far as what I thought it was as it could be. I could not have been more wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's very funny. And so clearly Preacher, Punisher, not interchangeable.
No, and
Um,
like the Preacher very much has a similar like tone to this. Like
hmm,
it's got like there's the ultra violence going on and a lot of dark stuff happens, but there's also like a certain level of cartoon of like some of the events and stuff that happen.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe something to hesitantly.
Yeah. It won't be for a while, but if we do this like on the scale of infinity, there is no way we aren't doing the first volume of Preacher at some point.
Eventually work our way around to it.
Yeah.
But I was going to say more. I don't know if outside of the podcast context, if I would be drawn to more ultra violence, but you were saying there's some more depth to it, and
Yeah.
like we talked about, that's something that does interest me, and that I think is the best part of this is that there is some interesting elements going on. Would I recommend this to somebody to read of what we've read so far? Probably not. I think that this is for a very
Well,
specific audience.
fair enough. It's like it's a different strokes for different folks kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do I have any friends that really love blood, gore, and very text dense books? I don't think of anyone off the top of my head, but um, I can understand that in terms of when we're thinking about things like Fritz the Cat, that it serves a purpose in understanding the bigger picture of the genre. It maybe can be hard to stomach, isn't for everyone, but it does serve a purpose and is important in terms of the historical understanding of. It sounds like Marvel Knights of the evolution of Garth Ennis, who now has done a huge volume of different important major things.
Yeah. Oh, he's like he's not quite at the top of the list for comic book writers, but he's definitely in like the top 10 most prolific,
Hmm.
famous comic book writers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Glad to have checked it out. And yeah, didn't dislike it as much as I thought I would, but certainly still took issues with a bunch of it and didn't really like it for a while. Took
Fair
me a
enough.
while to get into it, but once he was shot and recovering, that's when I started to enjoy it for. Yeah, Daredevil, and then after he got shot, but
Yeah.
I digress. So to wrap it up, if you didn't have a chance to read The Punisher, welcome back, Frank. Check it out. It's interesting read. If it sounds like something that would appeal for you, just be aware of all the trigger warnings, the ones that we mentioned at the very top, as well as I'll make sure that it is prolific on whatever kind of different platform you're accessing, whether it's the Instagram, the Blue Sky, or the link tree, or the podcast platform itself. I'll make sure the trigger warnings are on there as well. But all that said, what other kinds of content have you been enjoying this week, Spence? Are there any movies, TV shows, games, or books that have stood out to you?
Well, I guess the biggest one for me is I think my favorite anime this season is one called Zenshu. Have you heard about this one?
I have not.
Okay, yeah. So it's this new like anime original. I know this is gonna sound sketchy by saying this for now. It's an isekai. And no one likes isekais.
Uh-oh.
But the premise is it's about a like animator, but she's like stuck on her latest story of like trying to do a love story and she just can't figure it out. Like what like she has no experience to any of that. So then she is watching her favorite movie from back when she was a kid, and then as these things does, she eats a bad lunchbox, has food poisoning, and dies, and then gets sent to that world, her favorite
Hmm.
movie from back when she was a
Okay.
kid.
And so
And
is this a romantic fantasy?
it's kind of because then it's like yeah, because it's her first crush was the main character, even though she never really realized it.
Hmm.
And then but also it does a really cool job of like the animation and stuff are super stylized like it's so she looks like a modern anime character, but all the people she's talking to are like those more like pastel lighter, and there's like a little like unicorn buddy of like those old classic anime like mascot characters and stuff.
Oh,
And then
okay.
also the other really cool part is when she gets there her power becomes she can like animate real things into reality, and they are like some of the coolest looking animation stuff.
Hmm.
Like the first thing she animates, you ever seen Nausicaa of the Wind Valley?
I have.
Yeah, like her first thing she
Finally,
animates,
something I've seen.
yeah, she animates the fire giant from Nausicaa to it like
Wow.
yeah, and then it's all done with like the style of like animation, like it's not colored in, it's all like pencil drawings for the animation she
Hmm.
creates.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah,
This sounds interesting. This sounds like something I'll check out. Also, for those listening who are not familiar with the term isekai, it's you are dead and then you are reborn in another
yeah.
world. And this
It,
became a
it,
huge trend
yeah,
in
it means
manga and
literally
anime.
another world in Japanese. And yeah, it's people get transported or killed or whatever, and then go to another world. And it is some of the least creative stuff ever made are the modern isekais.
Yeah. And so it's just the fact that it's become a specific genre is insane when you think about it. You can have action, adventure, and isekai, and
Yeah.
they all mean different things. It's pretty hilarious. Obviously, there's crossover, but still, they are technically separate things. Okay, cool. What was the name of that one again?
Zenshu. It's by
Zenshu.
Studio Mappa.
Oh, Mappa. Okay.
Yeah.
All the more that makes sense then that they are so great. Okay.
Yeah.
Something worth checking out for sure. On
How
the
about
anime,
yourself?
yeah, on the anime front, I guess I can start there. Which is just a pretty basic rewatching Frieren,
Mm,
Journeys and Witch. For those unfamiliar, is just kind of the greatest fantasy tale of our generation.
yeah, well, we talked about this when we did Witch Hat Atelier too.
That's true. I mean, maybe it's because we keep talking about it that I
Yeah.
decided to rewatch it, but it's just so good.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just exceptionally good.
Yeah.
It's a
Manga
series.
volumes are really good as well.
There you go. It's absolutely a series. I know that I'm gonna probably have just my most rewatched series. I think right now Hunter x Hunter is my top rewatched, but
In its entirety, because that's pretty impressive. There's a lot of
I
episodes of that.
well, I'm talking about the second run, not the original. I couldn't get through all the
Yeah, I
original,
know, but
but
there's still like 150 something episodes in
that's true.
the
Okay. I
second
think I've
run.
watched it through 4 times. Um, do you want to
Oh,
hear something terrifying?
go.
Uh, one of my one of the people I work with right now is a huge Naruto fan. He's
Oh.
watched through the entire Naruto series plus Shippuden without skipping fillers 4 times. And he says that it's kind of the only thing he watches. And I was
Yeah,
like,
it would have to be if you're gonna watch it that much.
that's insanity. That's terrifying. I
Yeah.
couldn't do it, but kudos
No.
to him.
Yeah.
That's true. We've talked about Frieren before. Then I think my other two pieces are actually interesting because they, in some ways, kind of tie into Punisher. So the first one is Reacher. So season
Mm.
3 of Reacher is out. It's not done yet, but do you watch Reacher?
No. However, have watched the Tom Cruise movie.
Okay.
So I'm aware of the
So-
general premise and all that.
okay, Tom Cruise, very different physically from our
Yes.
main actors. So Reacher is so just basic action. It's former US Army guy becomes essentially someone who just sort of wanders around. He has no home. He just goes around with a toothbrush and he runs into trouble and he solves
Yeah.
crimes in whatever small town or huge organization situation he just finds himself in. Um, and certainly the first season, it's very small scope, and the second it gets bigger. Now it's even bigger, but it's really popular and I really enjoy it because it's not trying to do anything deep. It's essentially very similar to The Punisher, not in the cartoony way, but in the way that I was talking about, I enjoy, where you just have this character who's really clear on what he wants to do and he just does his thing, which is violence. Um, but if you're interested in just really, really well done action, absolutely check it out. Reacher is a great watch. And then I guess I'll do my last one, and then I'll want to see if you have any other pieces. But just that, and it's weird that it's all the season threes. I was thinking about this. Is this because of COVID timing? Like, why is everything season 3 right now?
Yeah, probably something like that.
Yeah, maybe. But the fact that Invincible season 3 is out,
Yes.
I'm still pretty early in that, but great series. For those unfamiliar, it is also a superhero show, also on Amazon Prime. Um, Also very gory, very
Yes.
violent. um,
Also
so
about why you shouldn't trust Superman.
also, yeah, exactly. Also, a la Garth Ennis,
Yeah.
criticism of superheroes. About I don't even know how to describe Invincible. I don't know how to describe this.
Yeah, well
You
it's
you've read the
about
comics, so you can try from the
yes.
comic point of view.
Yeah, so it's about like basically equivalent it is Superman's son and it's about how Superman's son um like about him trying to become a superhero and all that except oh plot twist Superman's not actually Superman. Superman is an alien invader planning to conquer Earth.
That's a great plot summary. I'm super glad I left that to you. So, yeah,
Yeah.
in case you didn't know and you watch Invincible, Invincible is also a comic series.
Yeah.
Uh, Also a very popular one, is my understanding.
Yes, very like even before the because I had read the whole series before the TV show came out,
Hmm.
and the really funny thing about that too is if you read the comics. So I like I had heard Invincible was very good, so I pick up the first comic and I read it. It's like okay, that's like it was pretty fun. It's cool. It's like okay, it's like a it's not great though. It's like it's kind of we've all been there of like oh young man trying to live up to Superman. Oh that's interesting. So then I put it down and never pick up the second one. And I'm talking to one of my friends like months later, and we get come up for some whatever reason. He's another comic book fan. We talk mention Invincible, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, what do you think of it?" It's like, and I give like, it wasn't that interesting. And he's like, "Oh, you don't know the twist, do you?" So and it was like, "What?" Because the thing is, the whole Omni-Man, the Superman equivalent, being evil doesn't happen until halfway through the second volume of the comic
Oh,
book series.
wild.
So yeah, because
That's crazy.
they do the very smart thing with the TV show by having it end the first episode is like I believe it's a like after credits even. or something like that.
No, I'm not sure. I'd have to recheck it, but yeah, it's right at the very end of the first
Yeah.
episode, which is genius because you're immediately hooked.
Yeah. I actually noticed that because I was ordering the new books, like I was thinking it would be a good series to have for the shop. So I was ordering them and I actually realized there's less books now. So I think they realized that was a problem. So they made the first book now go all the way to the Omni-Man betrayal.
Oh, that's so funny that they changed the way that that's super interesting.
Yeah.
You'll need to find that out, and if that's
Yes.
true,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. I haven't gotten them actually pick them up yet, but yeah, they came in I've ordered them recently. So
okay. Well, let me know. That'd be super interesting to find out. But has the story finished? Like, is
yeah,
Invincible
oh,
done?
it's been done for like over a decade now.
Interesting. Okay, so there is going to be a conclusion to it, but
Yes.
yeah, it's always been a great show. It's super great to watch. It's again very gory, very violent, but there's a lot of themes in there. A lot about family, a lot about responsibility. Um, that it just makes it a really enjoyable piece of media. I also thought that I was in one of the episodes I just watched. I just thought there was a quote that was so great that I immediately made me think about the Punisher as well, which was said by Cecil, who's sort of the CIA lead guy, which is you can either save the world or be a good person. You can't be both. I thought, oh, that's super good.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Also,
Invincible,
yeah.
absolutely.
Also, wow, there's way more. I remember there was 25 volumes of it.
Holy
So, so
mackerel.
we might be going, and like the first season's the only one I can really. I think the first season only covers the first 3 volumes.
Oh man.
So we might be at this for
Okay.
a long time.
Oh boy. Especially because there is often complaints about the time difference, like the length of time between the Invincible seasons.
Yeah. That being said,
Because animators are not paid properly.
yeah, and I believe they definitely slowed down the first season.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd probably speeds up a little bit, but still, we're probably still a lot of seasons left, I'm
A
sure.
lot of seasons left to do, yeah. But yeah, Invincible, another very gory, that's sort of the theme of this
Yeah.
this
Also, funnily
episode.
enough, the comic books are not that gory.
Oh,
They're like
interesting.
not gory, but like there's nothing like I said, I actually haven't watched this, but I've seen enough to know like there's nothing like the train.
That's
That's
wild that I immediately think of the train.
yeah.
I
Well,
didn't know. Is that just known to be the part that's the most violent?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Because I think it's just that perfect example of like if you had superpowers, how much damage you could do.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why. But what's insane is that I don't remember all of the series. Like, but as soon as you said ultraviolet, that was the first image I thought of. So it's crazy that you knew to call it out specifically, having not seen the show. That part's brutal. It's hard to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, ultra violent, ultra gory. The theme, different levels. I'd say like Reacher's your base level. Then you got your. I'd probably say Invincible is like high level gory, hard to watch, and then Punisher is also high level gory, hard to
Yeah.
look at, but on like cartoony goofy, whereas Invincible's like trying to make it more realistic.
Yeah.
Well, being absolutely excessive and over the top. And then we're not going to talk about the boys again, but that's on its own other planet. It's doing
Yeah.
its own thing, and then the
And then
planet past that is the comic.
yeah, exactly. And then yeah, then there's another one. Yeah.
And then the even further away planet. Yeah. But was there any other pieces you wanted to throw right in here at the end, Spence?
No, not really. Because Zenshu's definitely my favorite anime, but we'll see because we're right coming up on the new anime season is going to start up in like 3 weeks or so. So we'll see.
And we'll get to talk about Witch Hat,
Yes, that
the
that will
anime
be
version.
yeah.
It's exciting. Okay. Something else to look forward to. So now that we're winding down towards the end of the episode, of course, we need to introduce what's next on the reading docket. So, Spence, we are moving back into mangas. So, what do the fine folks at home and I get to look forward to reading next?
So I thought it would be fun. We're gonna go for an interesting little piece of nostalgia for you specifically. Not a comic you've ever read before, but a story you may remember. We are going to be doing The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages, the manga.
Wow. Okay. I think I saw this in your store the other day.
Yep. So yeah,
Uh,
so the Zelda games, they all have mangas, and well, not all, most of them have mangas, and yeah. So Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, they made the mangas of those like work together to make a little like 1-2 story, and
that's
it's
so
also
cool.
yeah, and also for everyone else, Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages were our first Zelda games. The two of us played.
That's true. I didn't even, yeah, they were.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, at first I was like, what on earth are we going to call back to from our childhood? And I was like, are we going to read Cardcaptor Sakura? But what other show? Monster Hunter
Yeah.
or God, whatever,
Mon
whatever
Mon
other.
Coley Mon Coley Nights, a show we used to, the most generic show ever made that we used to watch all the time, and you do not believe me when I tell you that we used to do this because you have no memory of it.
I have no memory of this.
Yeah,
Mon
exactly.
Coley Nights?
Yeah, we've had this exact conversation before.
I don't believe you.
No,
I
we
don't
100% used to watch this all the time.
I don't recognize this. I'm just looking at this on the computer. I have no idea what this is.
Yeah,
That I don't have.
we
And I remember a lot of the shows that we watch. I have zero idea of what on earth this is.
yeah, yeah. Like I said, we've had this exact conversation before.
Okay,
When
maybe
when it got added to Crunchyroll, I brought it up. It's like, oh, I remember this, and you're like, no, I do not believe you that we have ever watched this. But no, we 100% used to watch this one.
are you sure you're not thinking about Monster Hunter? I
I
remember Monster
guarantee
Hunter.
you.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll look at Mongolian Ice and see if all of a sudden I have like the weird like Russian sleeper agent. No, I won't say Russian. All of a sudden I have like a sleeper agent moment and all of the memories will come rushing back in. But to jump back onto topic, so that's super exciting. We are going to be reading Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages, and Oracle of Seasons, the combined manga
Yeah,
volume.
yeah. So the manga volumes is just one fat book, which has both
Ooh,
of them.
that's a long name. But I
Yeah.
made pretty straightforward one. That's do they not just call it Oracle of Season and Ages? I guess that doesn't make sense. They need
I guess because it was actually two stories, one of which was called Oracle of Seasons, one was called Oracle of
right.
Ages. So yeah,
Cool. Something to look forward to. That should be a lot of fun to read. And
yeah,
so, of course, you can order that at VesperiaComics.com for pickup at Vesperia Manga and Comics if you're in the lower mainland of beautiful British Columbia. Or you can also order The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages for Canada-wide shipping. And of course, we realize that buying a new book every 2 weeks isn't always financially viable for everyone, so consider inviting a friend to split costs or borrowing the book from a friend, or check a local library to see if it's available. We actually have a wonderful listener, shout out to the regular Zach, who keeps on finding these books at his local library. So there you go. It's true. These really do exist in the library. So check it out. And that's it for episode number 5 of the Long Comics Book Club. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow our Blue Sky and Instagram for updates, as well as join our Discord to share your own thoughts on The Punisher, Welcome Back, Frank, or the book in the next 2 weeks, The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, in advance of the March 29th podcast. And we will talk to you then. Bye-bye.
see ya.